So you've been pretty busy in the years since Mad Men. You've had a pretty smart strategy in choosing all of your roles. What made you choose them? What was your strategy? Talk about what you looked for in a role.
Well, I think, part of it was really understanding that I had gotten a pretty unicorn of a role with Don Draper, and to kind of try not to just do the same thing. So when Kimmy Schmidt came up, or Bridesmaids, or whatever these kind of goofball turns were, it was like, yeah, that seems fun. And meeting with, you know, getting to know Tina Fey and Kristen Wiig, and becoming friends with them. That's part of it. Was like, that was my, kind of the other side of my career. And then exploring that for a little while, and hosting Saturday Night Live, and doing doing fun one-off kind of guest stars and spots, and then coming back to my dramatic side of that thing with the morning show, or with Fargo, or even Landman, and now coming back to kind of being the lead, and number one on the call sheet, and uh, kind of carrying the show. I was like, that's something I forgot how much I like doing as well. So that was the opportunity for Friends and Neighbors, and what it really became, which is, a strong lead, an interesting show with a lot of facets and upside to it, and that's attractive to me.
Of course. So what was it about your friends and neighbors that made you say yes to it? I mean, there's a lot of pressure to being one on the call sheet again.
A big part of it was Jonathan Tropper. I've been a fan of his writing, not just his TV and film writing, but his prose, his short stories. He's a deep thinker, and a true artist, and a really smart, gifted guy. And I thought, okay, that's a good fit. That seems like a good fit, uh, for both of us. And yeah, the proof was in the pudding. He wrote a tremendous um, pilot script, and then you're always worried, like, is the next script going to be as good as this one?
Right. What's
And
episode two going to hold for you?
exactly, not to mention season two. So and it was, and the arc of the show was really creative and fulfilling, not just from an acting standpoint, but I think from an audience standpoint too. As the last episode just dropped Friday, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from it. People really liked it. So there's so much of that is satisfying.
It had been flattering to know that he said that he always had you in mind for the part. What did that mean for you?
Well, that is nice. You're right. I think it's also helpful for him as a writer, though, to have kind of my voice, or my, kind of presence in mind. I think it becomes easier to write to something, or at least more specific to write to something, when it's that apparent who you're going with. Um, it just becomes more specific, and I think it's an easier lift. It's an easier task to complete.
Now, how did you work with him on shaping the role of Coop? Was it all on the page, or did you work with him on evolving it?
Well, a lot of it was on the page. A lot of it was, he had this idea, because I think he had lived in Connecticut for some time, of maybe not exactly who this guy was, but once I've signed on, the clay started to form a lot more specifically. But he definitely knew this world, and we had conversations. I grew up in a leafy suburb of St. Louis, and a lot of generational wealth, and I certainly didn't have it, but a lot of friends and friends of friends had grown up with that kind of privilege, and it was a language that I spoke relatively fluently. Um, so yeah, I think it was a good fit for both of us, him as a storyteller, and me as the lead.
You also took on the role of executive producer. What did that mean to you?
Well, it's nice to have input at an early, uh, part of the process. So while I'm not getting down and digging into the nuts and bolts of production necessarily, there's other people whose job description is way more into that. I'm not a line producer on this. It's certainly not. I'm not making sure the Teamsters are getting paid. Um, but from a creative standpoint, it was really nice. So to have the access and the awareness and availability to say, I think we should hire Craig Gillespie to be the director of the first two episodes and really establish this tone and establish this look. And having worked with Craig and really trusting his ability to find the humor as well as the drama as well as the look and the luxe nature of this. I knew Craig could do it, and I knew he could do it fast. And I think what a lot of people don't, or a lot of people forget, is just how fast television has to work.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was a lot of weight on my shoulders for sure.
Right.
I had 11-page, 12-page days where I had so much dialogue and so much stuff to do. But, at the end of the day, it's like, well, this is the gig. You have to get it done. And I think that part of being the lead was kind of helpful and inspiring to the rest of the cast too.
Were all the scripts done when you started? Did you know where the show was going when you began?
I think all but the last one. And we had a sense, obviously Jonathan knew exactly what he wanted to do, but he kept the last one kind of in his back pocket because he didn't want anybody spoiling it or talking about it or any of that stuff. And I think that's smart. He's done the same thing for this season as well. So we had a lot of them. And he was very forthright and um, kind to just make sure that Connie, Tavel, and myself were a part of that process. This is what I'm thinking. What do you guys think? We had, 5 or 6 calls over the course of the season of just how we feeling, how are we liking where this is going? What do you think? And that's the same thing we've done this year, which is really great.
Does that help him? So did you know where the finale was going? Did you know what the last beats of the show were going to be?
Yeah, he shared it with me. He didn't share the script, but he said, this is how it's gonna break down. And I watched it like everybody else on Friday, and just from the feedback I got, people seem to be very happy and satisfied with how the story ended.
I think it was a
At
perfect.
least this chapter of the story, I should say.
It's definitely a good chapter. I think it was a perfect finale. I love the way that it sort of ended with, it sort of put a pin on the who done it and kind of we moved away from that. And then it sort of was a good opening act for where we're setting up for season two.
Yes, yes, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say how wonderful and lucky we were to get Corbin Burnson as kind of my antagonist in the show, and we had so many good actors that came through. So it's fun that everybody got a little something to chew on, and I think more to come in season 2 for sure.
What do you think it says about Coop? What really drives him in the end?
What I really liked about his journey in the first season too was just how much it sort of settled on him when it was looking very dire in the last few episodes, where he was going to have to really kind of come to Jesus about what he has gotten himself into and how that not only is going to affect his life, but how the resonance of those things affects people he really truly cares about, his children, his ex-wife, his sister,
Mhm.
people in his life. The collateral damage of all of this, I think, was something that he was really confronting in the last few episodes. And it's a wonderful scene with Amanda Peet, uh, where she says, "This is where you got to really fight,
Right.
and you can't give up. Like you can't just you are your kids going to be the kids whose dad is in jail for murder? Like what? If you didn't do it, figure it out." And that was a really lovely, important scene, and I think it really resonated with Coop, and it really hit home, and he really had to double down on figuring this out.
So do you think he's a good father? I think that's what motivates him.
I think he is, yeah, for sure. I think or he wants to be. He wants to be a better dad. Um, I think what Tropper really smartly did was kind of show Coop and Allie's parents as well.
Mhm.
Again, amazing casting, Michael O'Keefe, so wonderful. Um, and kind of see how that dynamic plays out and how Coop doesn't want that dynamic, but he definitely wants to be present and a good dad to his kids. And it's hard. I mean, anybody that has ever dealt with teenagers, and I don't have any kids myself, but I was a teacher for many moons, and they're tricky. I mean, by design. It's kind of
Mhm.
like they're built to mess up and learn. And as we all are, none of us are perfect specimens. So it's constantly a game of figuring it out.
And Coop's a tricky character too. How do you keep the audience on his side?
I think part of it is uh, whatever secret sauce I tend to bring to my roles. That's a big part of it. But I think the biggest part of it is that you're rooting for Coop because you understand that his circumstances are not entirely of his own making,
Mhm.
and he is kind of hung up in this difficult place, and you can tell he's trying to resolve it and get to a better place. Um, he's not perfect. He doesn't always make the right decisions, but he's trying to do better.
How does the voiceover help you and inform your performance?
I think it's kind of an amazing device. I think we've seen it in a few shows here and there, because it kind of it lets you know as a viewer that there is this sort of third party, omniscient sense of awareness. Um, just from a straight narrative standpoint, it's a good device to kind of get a lot of information out
Mhm.
quickly. But given the kind of luxury nature of a lot of the stuff, it's kind of funny too.
Mhm.
I mean, you get this kind of third party perspective on all these goods and services that the joke is, are they really worth all that money? Does, does that really make sense?
Right.
Um, so there's kind of an ironic attachment to it as well, which is, I think, the point of them.
And we've known you to do voices so many times before that it kind of becomes there's a sort of self-awareness to it too.
For sure. Absolutely. I mean, it's a little bit of an inside joke that the voice of Mercedes-Benz is pitching all of these, products. Former voice of Mercedes-Benz, I should say, but I did it for 15 years. I had a good run.
I also think, sometimes I question like, well, is he a reliable narrator? Can we trust what he's telling us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's on purpose too. There's something to be said. Like, is this really Coop who's narrating this, or is this some other version of this omniscient narrator? I think it's really Coop. I think he's trustworthy.
And how far in the future is this Coop?
Exactly, exactly. This is how it happens, right? This is him explaining what he went through. So by definition, he's gotten through it. But how? That's the fun and discovery.
Talk about working with Amanda Peet. That scene with the two of you in the finale. I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but she's got an amazing arc.
Yeah, I really wanted Amanda for this. I've been friendly with Amanda for years, years. I know her and her husband. We're table mates at the Vanity Fair uh, Oscar dinner every year. It's always super fun. And it was just one of those things like, how come we never worked together? This seems crazy. And this came up, and I said, I think you would be great for this. I think you would be really, really great for this. And she agreed. And she is, it's a sits very well in her voice, and her presence is nice. She has a tremendous um, confidence as an actor that's also kind of undercut by this sort of longing for something else, which I think fits so nicely with the relationship between Mel and Coop. Um, and it just worked. It's sometimes you chalk it up to chemistry or alchemy or however you want to say it. But yeah, sometimes the fairy dust sprinkles in just the right way, and it works. And she brings a lot to the role for sure.
There's still so much love between them, even though clearly they may not be meant for each other long term.
Yes, and part of that is having children, part of that is having a history, part of that is understanding, all of those things are ephemeral in some way. The wonderful episode where we take the kids to college and we kind of relive our college thing, and there's that kind of beautiful reconnection that is, of course, ephemeral. There's no way it can sustain itself, and they both realize it, and then of course it comes to such a heartbreaking end. Um, so there is something there, still. Obviously, I don't think you can have a relationship with somebody that's that long that produces children and it just ends. I think that part of that there will always be something that is, whether it's an ember, not necessarily a spark that starts a fire or anything, but there's still warmth there for sure.
Will we see more of that in season two?
For sure. They're still in each other's lives, and it's as the children grow and start to express their own independence and want and need to grow up and grow out. Uh, how do the parents kind of reestablish where they are in their own lives, and how does Coop's dealings with his own parents, kind of fit into that as well. So there's a lot of generational discussions that come up in the second season.
And then we have to talk about Olivia Munn too. Was it always going to be she is the culprit?
Well, yes, I think that was baked into the story. But her arc is also kind of great too when we see her take over the narrative. Literally, she takes over the narration, and you really get a sense of what her character had gone through, and how she has to navigate this kind of difficult place. And I think it was very elegantly told, that episode, to switch that like they did. That was a cool thing for Dropper to drop in at the end, like this is how it happens if you're me,
Mhm.
which was very nice.
And it sort of nicely sets up season two because, as you say in the show, she didn't kind of really do anything. She never really committed the fraud. Very
Exactly,
clever.
exactly. It's the stink is still there, but there's nothing to really hang it on. It's just it has its repercussions. I'll leave it at that.
So, what does that set up for season two for her character?
Well, exactly, dealing with the fallout, really, right? So if part of the nature of this environment is, how do you look, and what's your standing, um, sort of, how do you navigate some experience where your standing has been really severely compromised. That's a big part of season two.
So, Coop ends by walking away from the potential of returning to his job, which is probably the better choice for him, but returning to his life of crime. So, what does that mean for him? How does he? Did he steal the? Well, let me ask you this: do you think he stole the painting to make money, or steal the painting as a final fuck you?
I think probably both, but I think more of the latter rather than the former. I think what it means for Coop moving forward is, obviously, he's decided he wants to keep up with this pretty unsustainable lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
that has a lot of downside. So I think he needs to reconcile a lot of season two, like what is that going to look like practically? Um, and he has to figure out a way moving forward to make that make sense. And it won't be easy.
Right. He has no fence anymore, or does he?
Yeah, right. We'll see. There's a lot of fallout from all of this, and he's got to find a sustainable way to navigate it.
I mean, I kept thinking like he got away with it, but did he really get away with it?
Exactly. I mean, and if you got away with that much of it, why on earth would you go back? You dodged a bullet. You can't stand in front of the firing squad again. But as we've established, Coop doesn't always make the greatest decisions.
No, yeah, I don't know how much he really learned. As you look back over the course of the season, did you have any favorite moments?
Yeah, I mean, I really did. It was a great experience shooting the first season. It was lovely to be in New York City. It was lovely to shoot up in the beautiful Westchester County. It's so pretty up there.
Mhm.
And it was a nice summer. It was like a nice summertime job. And this again is a similar thing. Really getting a chance to be a part of New York culture, and see plays and go out to dinner and meet up with people, and also have an awesome job. Now we're in our actual apartment that we bought 2 years ago, and it took 2 years to renovate. But similarly, we were living in an Airbnb last year, and it was also kind of great. And had the dog out here, and it's really nice. It's nice to be a member of New York culture for sure. Uh, and we've had a couple versions of that too with the SNL 50th and then being here and going to see Good Night and Good Luck and so much fun stuff. So yeah, it's a good gig.
And what was the most challenging scene for you?
Well, a lot of the stuntier stuff of it was pretty challenging. Again, I think so much of that stuff is a lot easier when you're in your 30s. Uh, falling and tripping and kicking on a thing and all that other stuff is a lot harder, and the bruises take a lot longer to heal, and the sprains and the strains. Uh, but it all does play very well in the world of the story, because you really are watching a guy struggle. So yeah, that was the acting part. I've always had just a great time with. It's more the physical demands of it are a lot more challenging now.
What do you want audiences to take away from it?
Well, I hope they were entertained by the story. I mean, I used to have these conversations with Lauren Michaels all the time. He said, we are in the professional entertainment business. I said, yeah, I know. And so a big part of that is, telling a entertaining and compelling story, which I think we did. Um, but also setting up for something that's going to be enough to bring people back for the second season, and get them involved all over again. And hopefully we've established enough of the relationships between the uh, characters that we will have people excited to come back and re-engage with our little world.
And I was just in Austin, so I got to see you with John on.
Oh, nice.
That was really fun.
It was fun.
What did it feel like for you to revisit that world again?
It was wild. Both John and I were talking on the way down there, and then afterwards about how, you know, I think it came across in the talk too, of just how much, it was such a defining moment in both of our careers, obviously, and it's so meaningful to us still. Um, it's the basis of our relationship as friends for sure, and it was just tremendously enjoyable. And it's almost too much to kind of revisit in 90 minutes or however long that talk was, but um, judging by the turnout and the people that were there, it was pretty it was pretty fun for everybody involved.
There's still so much passion for that show.
Rightfully so, I think. I think it's a good one. People, there's a whole new generation of people that are discovering it. It's kind of getting a second life or a third life or however many lives we're on at this point. But yeah, a whole new generation of people are kind of like, hey, this show's really good.
And I thought you were really good about putting it in perspective in terms of like where, I don't want to say the show's failings, but just in terms of where it was in the space and time, in terms of how it addressed sort of racial and cultural issues.
For sure. It's like part of it was, and I think it was a really wise decision by Matt and the writing team and creatives. Like, it can't just be a travelogue through the greatest hits of the 60s without any kind of context. It just, otherwise it feels like a, whatever, like a clip show from,
Mm-hmm.
uh, hey, remember the 60s? Um, it was more specific than that. And I think that was the whole point of it. And that's, as a viewer, I think that's what's really satisfying, is it's not about the 60s. It's about Don Draper and Sterling Cooper and all the people involved in that. It's not about advertising. It's about these people. That's the fun part of it.